All right, good evening. We'll call this meeting to order at 6:36. I assume this meeting's been properly noticed, Rob?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Going through roll call, everyone here is present and accounted for tonight. In your packet, we have the minutes of February and the April meetings. Do we have any comments or revisions on the previous meeting minutes? There are no comments or revisions to the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve?
Move to approve the minutes of the previous two meetings.
Motion by Alderman Tierney. Do we have a second? Second by Cam. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 6, public comments and appearances. So if anybody would like to make any public comments or appearances, please step up to the podium, say your name and address, and do your best to keep the comments to 3 minutes or less. Any public comments tonight?
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Pleitner. I reside at 1890 Astor Street in Port Washington. I'm also the 5th Ward Alderman representing that district and the area up for discussion for the State Highway 33 proposal from the State Department of Transportation. Over the course of the weekend, when I was apprised of this meeting agenda item tonight, I contacted the remaining residents in the Hidden Hills neighborhood and Hidden Hills condominiums on the west side of Port Washington to notify them that this would be happening and to contact me with any thoughts or comments. There are about 110, 120 homes between the homes and the condos in Hidden Hills. I received about 10 comments, all of which were opposed to the state DOT's plan to reduce the lane count to 2. So that would mean that all the comments I received were in favor of maintaining the 4-lane section of Highway 33 that's on the western side of our city. So I myself would count myself among them to say that I think that with the additional growth on the west side, the development of the Shannon Farm, development in Saukville, development Northwoods Road, up north of the Fife Family YMCA, with additional traffic flow, additional counts coming in, I think it's important that we maintain the 4-lane layout of Highway 33 on the west side of Port Washington. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderman Pleitner. Any other public comments? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Troy Caston, 290 North Sweetwater Boulevard. Live pretty close to Jonathan. I agree with everything you just said, 100%. I'll just keep it at that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other public comments tonight? Okay, if there are no other public comments, we'll close that part of the meeting. Moving on to item 4, old business. Do we have anything, Rob, on that? Okay. Then we'll move right into our main item 5, new business, which is a presentation by Miller Engineers on the schematic engineering report for the North Beach Bluff. I'll let Rob introduce them.
Sure. Give a quick introduction. You may recall last June, there was a massive bluff slide into Lake Michigan, which in response to that, the beach was closed for the summer. There was very little beach to be had in any case because we were at near high record water levels on Lake Michigan. Since then, the water has receded, but in response to this event, I'll credit our partners at LNRP, Lakeshore Natural Resources Partnership, worked on the city's behalf to obtain a grant from the Fund for Lake Michigan to support this effort to do preliminary engineering on the North Bluff. So they have been working on that project essentially since last fall and recently completed it prior to April 1st. And so we've, Roger Strom and I have met with Roger Miller and Emily Bloom to go over the results or their findings from this effort. So we're working towards what we hope will result in final engineering and eventually improvements to the bluff to stabilize it. But Emily's going to go over some of the options and their findings.
were,
Just drag the microphone on the, just
sure.
pick it up and
There we go.
go.
All right. So, like Rob said, we have been evaluating the bluff and shoreline that's adjacent to Upper Lake Park and the North Beach. During the 2020 and 2021 high water levels, there was severe erosion at the base of the bluff, leading to scarps that propagated up the bluff to reach a quasi-equilibrium slope, resulting in these bare steep scarps. So, in addition to the natural wave action, there was also some issues with a saturated silt and sand seam, which further exacerbated the bluff instability. So we prepared the schematic engineering planning proposal and have since completed that proposal. The reason why this is such an important project is, we have extremely tall bluffs to the point where the crest is getting within 10 feet of a portion of the northbound loop of the park. And it's also been a historic problem with continued issues on the bluff stability. So our scope of services within this proposal included doing a concept plan, a topographic and bathymetric survey so we could obtain the geometry of the existing bluff face, as well as the shoreline and the lakebed geometry through the bathymetric survey. We also performed 3 soil exploration borings to determine the subgrade and to determine the optimal options for different types of soil grading, as well as additional mitigation options to improve the bluff stability. Wave and shore erosion analysis, which is dealing with the fluctuating water levels, as well as any types of mitigation efforts in that, to prepare schematic plans and construction costs, and to identify and assist with grant sources. So this is a figure of our topographic and bathymetric survey. So we performed the survey along the bluff face, along the eastern portion of the bluff, as well as the beach and the lake bed. We obtained samples which can be seen as these. Well, that doesn't really show very well.
I don't know if you're able to use your,
Yeah, not.
well, no, are you
Yeah,
able to use
maybe
your,
our cursor.
yeah, your cursor, because that's the only way it shows up on
Yeah.
TV.
Okay. So we obtained sediment samples as a profile in locations across the bluff and the park within the shoreline. This mostly showing that while we have sand and gravel along the beachfront adjacent to the bluff toe, very shortly after we get to silt and sand, as well as some finer grained materials the further out that we go. And this really indicates to us that we've got a fairly closed loop system, meaning that the wave energy comes in perpendicular to the shoreline, or however the wind direction pulls it into, and we're not really getting a lot of sediment migration. So within this location, we don't have a lot of fluctuating lake bed depths. We don't have a lot of sandbars within this area. So in general, we have a pretty equilibrium position of the shoreline itself. Also note that we, during our survey on the bluff, we had noted that there was a wet silt and sand seam along a good majority of the bluff. So this blue area shows where we saw that within the bluff face itself. And you can note that it's quite continuous from the southern end to maybe 2/3 to 3/4 of the remainder of the bluff, and some occasional wet seams observed a little bit further north, but the continuous seam being mostly located in the southern portion. That can be seen in this photo as well. You've got this light brown color of the bluff face, and then we have this darker seam right here, and that is the saturated silt and sand seam. So again, quite continuous and quite easily visible within the lower third to lower half of the bluff. Yeah, I know. So we are, this area is relatively closed off from other groundwater options for supporting this seam. So we have a significant grade drop along this Valley Creek. And so we are expecting that the water that's sourcing this seam is from a portion of the upland of the creek, which is flowing through that sand seam and then further discharging along the bluff face itself. This has been a problem since quite some time ago. In 1996, there were oblique images obtained, and this is on the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program website. But as you can see, even in 1996, adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant, we do have bare scarps from during the prior high water period, which is quite bare, and you can see that darkened seam as well. As you move further north, we become vegetated again. So the exacerbated portion with the saturated silt and sand seam is really mostly in the southern portion. So we prepared a schematic design to address these issues, and this shows our maximum recommended extent of work. So the first being on the southern portion adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant, we've got 3 directionally drilled subsurface drains. And what those are is a drain that is approached from the top of the bluff and then directionally drilled, and a portion of that pipe will be perforated so that it can take the water flow that is within the saturated silt and sand seam and direct it down to the bottom of the bluff far enough back so that we're stabilizing the bluff face itself. The second portion of this design is grading back the remainder of the bluff so that we don't have those steep scarps along the top of the bluff, as well as rerouting a portion of the road that has been the closest to the existing scarps. This will also feature, if approved, an access path that is about 4 feet wide, and it'll be a traversing path that pedestrians can use to access from the top of the bluff to the shoreline and the beach itself, as well as a maintenance access path to improve maintenance of the vegetation along the bluff and any other options that need to be addressed. The other main portion of the schematic plan is armoring the base of the bluff. So while we're grading back the remainder of the bluff to create it into a quasi-equilibrium slope, future high water levels would continue that process of eroding at the base of the bluff and reinitiating this process. So by armoring the portion of the graded back bluff, we're essentially stopping that progression and protecting the bluff and all of the measures that were done from future erosion levels and from future recession. In addition to the revetment, we're also recommending having beach nourishment, which is shown in the shaded pink area. This extends farther than what the revetment is shown, simply because it's a relatively cost-effective measure, and it also improves the quality of the beach and the aesthetics in that area, as well as provides additional beach width than what is currently there. So this cross-section shows our borings, and again, we encountered that dense saturated silt and sand seam shown in blue at the lower half to lower third of the bluff. And so because we've seen it on the face of the bluff and within the boring itself, we're confident that it's quite continuous. In general, we have spatially variable sands and seams. But because we have seen that this is relatively continuous along the bluff face as well as further back within where we're having our boring, and the fact that we have this water that's continually seeping from further up north, it's a relatively continuous seam that a directionally drilled boring will be, a directionally drilled subsurface drain will be able to capture and hit appropriately. This cross-section also shows in the dark black the current condition of the bluff face, so the current geometry of that. Again, having the steep scarps at the top of the bluff, having those loose soil masses that are at the base of the bluff. So the dashed line adjacent to it is our recommended cutback in order to create that quasi-equilibrium slope. So some of the bluff crest will be recessed back in order to provide that equilibrium slope and in order to have a safe, usable area. Additionally, you can see that there's the revetment at the toe of the bluff and the beach nourishment that we had discussed earlier. So Lake Michigan, its water levels fluctuate as much as 6 feet. It's quite cyclic. Right now we're coming out of the high water level in 2020 and 2021. Currently, in this says March, but also within April, we've been right at around average. So we can expect water levels to fluctuate another 3 feet down and to continue that cycle of highs and lows. This image shows in 2020 how we have rarely any beach adjacent to the bluff toe, but that in 1990, during a low water period, we have a substantial width. So while we are taking up some space with the revetment itself, these water levels that are fluctuating are going to also fluctuate our width of the beach. And also the beach nourishment will aid in that and creating a larger width beach. So for our wave shoreline analysis, we did a bathymetric survey. So we used a kayak and sonar data that was grabbing the depth to the lake bed. So then we had that geometric mapping of the lake bed. Again, quite flat and uniform in this area. And from that, we were able to determine what the water level height is adjacent to the shoreline structure during the high water levels, including storm surge, what our run-up is going to look like so that we could appropriately size the revetment in order to be tall enough that it's not going to be overtopped during those high water periods, and also deep enough so that during the low water periods, as that wave action progresses further south or further eastward, that is not going to be undermined. So that's what this figure is depicting. So for the schematic plan that we had shown, this is our estimate of probable construction costs. So to go through final design and permitting and grants, it is $150,000. We also have our directionally drilled subsurface drain lines to redirect that subsurface water and provide stability in that measure. The bluff excavation and pathway to provide an appropriate geometry. The revetment to protect all of that infrastructure from future high water levels, and the beach nourishment in order to provide an aesthetic beach and minimize our impacts to the natural lake dynamics. And that's in about the $7 to $10 million range. Alternatively, we can also look at reducing the amount of area that we are grading back. Regardless, we're going to want to do the directional drilled subsurface drain lines in order to redirect that water. But the amount of area that would be graded back can fluctuate and is really up to the city and its constituents on what you really would like to do with that area. So this is an option in order to reduce the amount of area that's impacted and stabilized, and that would be in about the $4,000 to $7,000 range. Sorry, yes, correct, 4 to 7 million. So, as Rob said, this portion of the project was funded by Fund for Lake Michigan. They have also received the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program in order to do the final design and permitting of this. A sea grant application is pending for further research at the north end. And some additional options include Sustain Our Great Lakes, FEMA, Knowles Nelson stewardship. So there are plenty of options for addressing this project. in the future. So the next project steps would be to determine what financing we have for this, so, and therefore figuring out how much area we really want to be working with and stabilizing in order to provide an appropriate amount of beach for people to use. And continuing to have grant applications, preparing final designs, and then as a first measure, in order to provide some beach access during this summer, is to first reconstruct the portion of the road, because that can be lost at any time due to the proximity of the crest of the bluff to it at this point. As well as installing the directionally drilled subsurface drain lines to provide immediate relief from that, and some minor grading. So the city had requested that we provide a schematic plan for the minor grading in March of 2022. And here's a figure showing from 2022 that slump that has now prevented access from the wastewater treatment plant concrete walk access to the bluff itself, to the beach itself. So our plan would be to remove that large soil mass in order to restore that access to the public. And that is all that we have. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Emily. I'll kick it off. So when we talk about the bluff instability, is the number one driver of that the drainage seam or the slope of the bluff, or both? Does that work in tandem?
Right. So the two mechanisms that are causing the bluff instability are the high water levels that are eroding at the base of the bluff, which now we don't currently have because we're at the average water level,
Okay.
as well as the saturated sand seam, and that is what creates the environment in order to have that steep slope.
Okay. And that seam, it sounds like, is pretty static. It stayed the same spot for many years, as you showed.
Correct.
And why is that? It runs into harder clay, that's where it comes out, or?
So these bluffs were created, and while they were being formed, you do have these random locations that are spatially variable of that silt and sand, because it used to be an old lake bed. So typically we don't see this continuous of a seam, but in this location we do, and that's why there's been chronic issues for the past for several decades at least.
And then the drainage pipe is obviously the number one alternative that we want to do probably in any regard. What percentage, back of the envelope, does that, of the problem, does that solve? Just a drainage?
Right.
The boring?
That addresses the further instability that is caused by water seeping. So we don't consistently have water and hydrostatic pressure that's building up within that seam. It comes in waves. So during some periods of time, we're going to have more flow into those seams, and then that aggravates it at a certain time. So that's going to help in that respect. However, all of Lake Michigan is recessing at about 50 to 100 feet per century. And it usually doesn't occur in 1 foot increments per year, but as these larger slides. So if only the subsurface drains are installed, then the bluff will continue to have its natural recession. And then you'll just determine how much more of the road in the future you may need to relocate, but you can certainly let that continued process move forward.
Yeah, Roger.
Additional comment. I'm Roger Miller. In that southern portion of the bluff, and if you recall, any time that you walk along the little asphalt pathway from the north end of the concrete promenade around the wastewater treatment plant, there's always been a chronic wet seep right across the little asphalt path.
Yep.
And the soil's always creeping all the time, year-round. So in that southern area where we've proposed the directionally drilled groundwater interceptor drains, those drains, so that area now has always been much less stable than every place else, and therefore has recessed back farther west at the top, and they're always wet, sloughing, sliding soils. So intercepting that water now has that position then behave more like the mid-bluff areas where the water's not chronically seeping from that same seam, but of course, erosion still occurs from storm wave erosion during high water that steepens the toe, and then you get the scarps up. So it really addresses the water component of the southernmost portion.
Okay. Any questions for Emily or Roger from the board? Okay. Anything from our engineers here? Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Okay.
And the report.
Okay.
Okay, so with the beach nourishment portion of the project, is this expected to be a one-time beach nourishment, or is this something that's going to have to be redone repeatedly over the years?
Sure. So typically what we see is a north-south migration of sediment along the shoreline. However, we do have the protrusion of the harbor itself, as well as our sediment sampling really indicates that there hasn't been a lot of cross-shore movement of that sediment. So even during low water periods, we don't have an especially large amount of accumulation of sand within that pocket of the existing wastewater treatment plant's revetment and the rest of the bluff. So that really suggests that it's going to be quite stagnant. However, there can always be a future evaluation on whether or not there needs to be more beach nourishment in the future, but we expect that to be relatively closed off in that system.
Yeah, so typically, beach nourishments on open reaches that have the longshore drift would need to be done about every decade. But at this location, based on our sediment sampling, this may not need to be done for 30 or 50 years. There's really no deterministic analysis to confirm that, but from the patterns of existing sediment that we see, it looks like we've got a pretty static location. So this is an unusually favorable position to do some beach nourishment and have it endure for an unusually long period of time compared to the open beaches.
Okay, thank you.
And then how tall is the revetment?
So we have that going up to, I believe, 593 in elevation. 590 in elevation. So we have the high water period, a high calm water level of about 582.5, in addition to a typical 1 foot of storm surge and several feet of wave run up. So that's how we determined that elevation.
So then the wave action will hit the
About 10
revetment?
feet above
Yeah.
the present water level.
Okay, so waves will hit the revetment, saving the bluff from the under.
During high water periods, correct. During low water periods, it will continue to fluctuate and erode the beach naturally as it would have without that system.
And I know I asked this question when you guys presented in the fall. What happens to the ecology of the north part of the bluff past where we're doing this engineering work? How is that affected?
Unaltered.
It remains unaltered and,
Correct.
Yeah, it remains unaltered because no work is proposed on that northern portion of the bluff
Yeah.
that historically has had pretty stable vegetation on it.
and any unforeseen impacts by doing something here?
No, because the revetment itself is tucked so far west, it really doesn't play a part of the lake cross-shore dynamics. Adding the beach nourishment actually provides the natural way for the near cross-shore section to adjust to the different lake levels. So it's actually designed as a system that avoids any adverse impacts. You always want to avoid revetments that cause a lot of wave reflection. So this is the sort of the soft natural approach to improving the access and usability of the beach.
Right, and there can always be some effects of wave action at the edge of the revetment itself. So typically what you can see is a little bit of erosion at the end of it where it's no longer protecting it. But again, that beach nourishment is providing some buffer to that, as well as the small cross-section.
Yes, Alderman Tierney?
I know this may not be your area, and I appreciate the detail you guys have gone into, but when you cut back the bluff, is there any particular recommendation on foliage or plantings that should be put on there to help stabilize it? I mean, because we're all familiar with when those slides come down, they bring trees and everything down elsewhere than to the beach. So
Yeah.
is there anything in
so-
particular you can talk about there?
Right. So in general, what we like to suggest is whenever you're vegetating a bluff to have fairly deep-rooted plants, so that it can help bind in the soil, so that it's kind of giving it a bit of a buffer from freeze-thaw cycles, which are natural erosion type processes that are within the upper couple feet. So when you have deep-rooted plants, that's optimal to help protect against that. The wastewater treatment plant slope that's just to the south has been doing quite well, and that vegetation would likely be something that we would want to continue further northward. But we do plan on consulting with John Crane from the city and determining other types of material, other types of vegetation such as junipers to go there.
And that's actually a key component of the final design, because our deep soils are stiff enough that we can have extremely steep, tall bluff faces temporarily. But it's the, as Emily mentioned, it's the wetting and drying of soils and freezing and thawing that causes the relatively shallow sliding. So to compensate for spring thaw and surface saturation, it's the plant roots that have to bind that top several feet. So the native forbs grasses that are relatively deep-rooted, as well as relatively drought and wet tolerant, are a part of that reinforcing. So that biostabilization of the face is actually a key component of the final design.
Any other questions for Emily or Roger? Yes, Alderman Sigwart?
Why shouldn't we select alternate B?
You have every option to select alternate B. So the further that we regrade the bluff and the further that we're protecting, the longer reach of area that will be usable and safe for public access to use. However, typically a lot of the recreational use will be in that southern portion. So it's definitely feasible just to protect that southern portion for the beach access, with the thought in mind of continuing to move forward and further northward as providing additional area, as well as, at the top of the bluff you have quite steep scarps. So in order to avoid losing a larger chunk at one point in time, grading that back at that point provides that knowledge of creating that stable area instead of losing larger chunks over time.
However, if it were my tax dollars, I would choose B because it provides still more, maybe 150 yards of lineal beach that's quite usable, which is really plenty for our population use here. And most users of the beach will stay really within the southern 100 yards. The only uses farther north from that are really beach walking, which works all the time except when water is extremely high. So for benefit cost of, let's say, our local money, I think that's the appropriate choice. However, we should be careful about saying this public meeting, very successful meetings with Senator Tammy Baldwin had the approach, 10 million, no problem for congressional. So if we're using our federal tax dollars and things, That's an option to consider if there are construction grant successes. Those things are up to you and Roger and Rob. But B provides lots of functionality.
And then the elimination of the Park Road has to do with the flattening of the slope and the drainage pipes, correct?
Correct. So the drainage pipes actually are wouldn't impact where the road is located, and we position them so that with the new road position, it would be safe from that rework. But it is mostly due to the proximity of that crest of the bluff to the road itself.
All right. Rob or Roger, anything to add from staff's perspective? Just taking it all in? Yeah,
We've heard it before.
okay, all right. All right, Alderman Casper?
So it looks like we have some grant money available to start moving forward with design. So the design-wise, how agnostic to option A or B is the design, or do we need to know what way we're going before we begin the design?
It would be preferable to know which way that you're going for the design. We, again, have the schematic design, so we have a good handle on on the volume of work, and it can easily be scaled for larger areas. But in general, having a good idea of which option, or at least a 100 to 200 foot range, would be ideal.
Yeah, because if we're just with city dollars, we're probably going with B. But if, you hate to have the design done and then the federal government, well, the federal government's dropping $10 million on us, I guess we can pay to redo the design. But you'd rather not do the design twice.
Sure.
So we do have a work order in for you to consider for final design at $97,000, which of course is well under the budget. So what one strategy could be to get going on design is, let's say, choose a specific design for B. And then if significant amount of federal money comes along, it's not that difficult because the cross sections, we've got several typical cross sections. We've got the southern cross section with the directional drilling. Then we've got the intermediate cross section with cutback slope. And then we've got the do nothing cross section to the north. So it's not a great effort to establish all the plans and specifications for B. And then if it looks like A is to be chosen, to then just expand some of those cross sections, and plan view is not a major additional task to have then that alternate as a final design available for bidding.
All right, any other questions?
So, yeah, I'll just add, so next steps are, at either the June or July Board of Public Works, we'll bring back a proposal for final engineering, and as Emily alluded to, this is something that, so that the schematic engineering was paid for at approximately 90% by Fund for Lake Michigan. The final engineering, we have a grant from Coastal Management for approximately 40% of the cost of the final engineering. But we've secured that grant. We can't begin on it until we have the grant agreement signed, which I anticipate sometime in July, the latter part of July or in August. And so that's why we'll bring something back to the board for approval again in June or July.
And I think there was one question about whether or not the schematic report would be available online. That's up to you.
Yeah, we can put the schematic report, and then I think you've sent me your PowerPoint, so we can put the PowerPoint on our website as well.
One more thing. I think our packet only had alternative A. Could we get a copy of the alternative B too to look at?
Correct. That was added into this presentation after discussions on budgeting. Yes, I have one right here.
we'll leave the big paper copy of that too.
Okay.
We only have the presentation version of it. We don't have the large copy of it with us
Oh, I
today.
thought you folded that up and put it, okay,
Not this new one, no.
okay, got it.
We-
I will drop it
Assuming
off.
you can just send it, you're right, if you just email it to me, I can get it online as early as tomorrow.
Perfect.
All right, very good. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Roger. Very good
you.
presentation. Appreciate it. All right, moving on then to item B, which is consideration and possible action on a proposal to reduce State Highway 33 from 4 lanes to 2 lanes with an on-street bike path between County Trunk Highway LL and Jackson Road. Turn it over to Rob.
All right, so as you know, we have entered into an agreement with Wisconsin Department of Transportation for resurfacing of Highway 33 in the year 2027. And so as part of the scoping meetings, I can tell you that the Department of Transportation has many representatives at these meetings. And one of them asked the city and the village and the town to consider restriping the lanes so that there would be 2 lanes, just a single lane in each direction and a bike lane, on-street bike lane, but only from Northwoods Road to County Trunk LL. All right, so they recognize that there's a dedicated bike trail off-street, but typically those are appreciated by recreational bikers such as myself, but the people who wear spandex tend to go right on the road, and they prefer to just go a lot faster than I go, and they use that more for commuting. But I see the drawback in this proposal is, it only gets you between that dedicated bike lane is for a limited range. So, in any case, they've asked us to review this. My gut reaction kind of aligned with, what Alderman Pleitner said, that I had a feeling that people would prefer 4 lanes. A little bit of the backstory on this. So this project, which was completed in 2013, but we started the design process in 2003, so it was almost a 10-year design process for the 33 project that was completed a decade ago. The DOT, when they reconstruct a highway, they have traffic projections for 30 years out, right? 20 or 30? 20, yeah, 20 years out. So the traffic in 2010, which was the original design year, was approximately 10,000 vehicles per day. They projected initially over 30,000 vehicles per day in 20 years. So we're at 10 years past there now. And I can tell you in 10 years, there's actually less traffic now than there was in 2010. In spite of my loud protests over their traffic projections, I was only able to get the projections reduced down to 22,000 vehicles per day. And again, we're nowhere near that amount. We'll never get near that amount. So the road's been constructed. The curbs are where they are. The only compromise I could get out of the DOT is, and you may notice that in Port Washington, as opposed to when you leave Saukville, Saukville's a little wider. Port Washington's a little narrower. We have 11-foot lanes rather than 12-foot lanes. We did that on purpose so that we'd have shorter crosswalks for pedestrians from Hidden Hills and at LL. And we want traffic to move slower, not faster. When they come into the city, that's why, the roundabout was very intentional to not only improve traffic safety for motorists, but of course pedestrians as well. So I think we did the best that we could to make Highway 33 safe. We have a sidewalk on one side and a 10-foot multi-use path on the other. We have a good, healthy 10-foot terrace between the back of the curb and these walkways, and I'll pat myself on the back. I had to fight hard for that as well. They wanted that only 6 feet wide, and so we worked hard to make sure that, again, we'd have healthy green space and eventually, hopefully, a healthy canopy of trees covering the highway. So yeah, I mean, we take great pride in the way that the highway looks. So yeah, my recommendation is to maintain the status quo. The Village of Saukville is meeting on this as well, but I know their staff is probably even more adamant in spite of it only being, just a small portion is in the Village of Saukville. And I think the town's gonna go along with whatever the city and the village agree upon. But our recommendation is to maintain the 4 lanes. The advantages of just having 2 lanes, again, I think those are minimized by the fact that, it's 26 feet from curb to curb on the highway. And so having only a single lane and a bike lane, I don't think that's gonna accomplish the goal of slowing down traffic.
So this is an example of too little, too late, right? I mean, the asphalt's there, and
I
now
think that's one way to put it.
to put a bike lane in where you have a multi-purpose path already.
Right, so, I mean, originally, when they do, when they design a roadway, they project the level of service, so it's A, B, C, D, E, and F. And essentially the problems with 2 lanes is the level of service for trying to get on, not using the highway, so there's always gonna be free flow of traffic on 33. I don't think we're ever gonna see a traffic jam. But as far as getting on, so some of the experiences you might have if you're on like Park Street or Moore Road at around 3 o'clock, you might have to wait a little while to get onto Grand Avenue. With having 4 lanes, that makes it a lot easier for, like, at Hidden Hills to make a turn onto Highway 33. They're not gonna have to wait as long because you have more traffic lanes. So in any case, those are some of the reasons why I think the status quo is going to be preferred.
Alderman Tierney.
Do you need a recommendation on this, or do you want?
Yes, they're looking, right, we're looking for a motion so that I can give that information to the DOT, and quite frankly, we can move on.
Yeah, I drive that east and west every day, and I think the way it's right now, it works very well. It does have, I think, a calming effect on traffic coming from the west into town. I just think it really works well, and so I'll move to maintain that. We recommend maintaining status quo.
We have a motion by Alderman Tierney.
I'll second it.
We have a second by Alderman Sigwart. We have Alderman Gasper, further discussion?
Yeah, I had some questions yet. Rob, you had said that they wanted, that the DOT going down a single lane each direction wanted to have wider lanes than are currently out there?
No, I don't.
So it would be maintaining 11-foot through lane.
I'm sure they would allow, I would imagine they'd allow that. I drew I included the drawing of the lanes, which may have been overkill, but
Yeah, there wasn't a typical section,
there
nor
was
were
a
there any
scale
dimensions.
that showed it, yeah. So I imagine they'd make it they'd keep it 11-foot wide if we wanted.
Okay. I know we're going to end up voting to keep it the way it is, but was there a reason that DOT was keeping the bike lane against the travel lane and not putting it to the curb and just having a painted out buffer lane, which would be much, much safer and more sensible? Or did they intend to allow parking in there?
No, I don't think they intend to allow parking. And maybe I shouldn't presume, but we have not talked about it in detail, and so I would expect that they would be willing to use any configuration that we desired as long as it met their FDM.
Okay. Well, I continue to think it should ever have only been a single lane in each direction. And when the legislature likes to accuse cities and municipalities of wasting money, this is where the state wastes a lot of money because now it's a long-term maintenance obligation for DOT. Hence, they're repaving this and they're going to spend twice as much money than what they needed to repave it. And the state does this all over the place, wasting money on stuff like this. Traffic projections are, they're not as reliable as DOT would like to think, and that's me and my soapbox as someone who used to do those.
Can I add to that?
Yeah,
I'll
go
just
ahead.
be
I'm
brief.
with you.
I can tell you, so there's dedicated left and right hand, in addition to having 4 lanes, there's dedicated right hand and left hand turning lanes. And Alderman Gasper, you know that they have desired lengths for these lanes, and so I was fighting for the shortest lanes possible, and they were fighting back for the longest lanes possible. And when they had the length of acceleration and deceleration lanes that they wanted, they almost ran into each other. And so I can tell you, I buried somewhere downstairs, one iteration that the DOT proposed for this project was 6 lanes. It was going to be a 6-lane highway.
Right.
And then I pushed back, and so now we have what we have now. Yeah.
So this is probably as close as you
6
get.
lanes.
Yeah, to a mea culpa by WISDOT saying they overbuilt it. I mean, and, hopefully this is a sign of a sea change at WISDOT that they're willing to even suggest bike lanes, and do something different. So there's obviously generational changes happening, in transportation.
I'd say and Alderman Gasper works with them much more frequently than I do, but I think it depends on who you work with over there.
Well, and also I would love to sow chaos at DOT and have Port Washington, Saukville, and the town all say 3 different things out here. So I'll vote no on this just to try to help that along as best I can.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, so we have a motion by Alderman Tierney and a second by Alderman Sigwart. There is no further discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 5-1. All right. Moving on to item C, consideration and possible action on bids received for the 2023 sidewalk improvement project. Turn it over to Roger.
All right, so we have annually budget for sidewalk replacements for lifted sidewalks, cracked sidewalks, otherwise deteriorated sidewalks in the city. We budgeted $110,000 for that work this year. As I started putting, as Ross went out and collected data, sidewalks needed to be done. As I started tallying up the total, I kind of realized that it looks like we're going over budget. So I set this up as a base bid with an alternate for James Drive and Antoine Drive as the southernmost limits of this project. So we received our bids. I don't have that listed here. It doesn't look so. $85,600. And with the alternate was roughly $26,000. So that put us over our $110,000. So my recommendation is let's award this project for base bid. The low bidder was Primoris Electric. They did our work last year. My understanding is they did a good job. So I would just, I see no issue with awarding the contract to them. So I guess we're seeking a motion to award the 2023 concrete sidewalk replacement project to Primoris Electric for $85,600 and to not award the bid alternate.
All right. Any questions for Roger?
I'll move to approve the base bid to Primoris Electric.
Second.
One more comment about them. Actually, they did the work on North Wisconsin Street last year. That was the best organized sidewalk crew I've ever seen. They really did a good job with traffic. They did a good job with pedestrians. They organized their work well, and they got out of there. So I'm glad to see them come back.
Yeah, I sense they're, there's a nod to Deb. I think they do a lot of work for We Energies, and I think because of their safety requirements at We Energies, they're a little better organized than your average municipal crew. Yeah, that's my take on it.
Very good. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Roger. Moving on to item D, consideration and possible action on a proposal from Strand Associates for Spring Street Interceptor Engineering Design Approval. Take it away.
All right, so this is another project, and Dan Beeler's here in the audience, so you can chime in at any point too. That it looks like this project has been on budgeted for work the last 3 years, and so for whatever reason it didn't get done the last 2 years, but we just kind of looked at it. Spring Street Interceptor, we know we have some basements along that sewer that back up whenever we get a decent level storm. And so we'd like to fix that problem. It'll also help facilitate future development. There'll be more capacity in the sewer. So we had asked Strand for proposal to improve that sewer, which you have in your packet. And so right now, it appears there's enough budget money between the 3 years that if their estimate for construction that we could do the whole thing. But really, right now, what we want to do is get the design done. We get another opinion of probable cost, and then they'll probably coincide nicely with budgeting time. And if we need to add some more money to the pot, we can do that. Otherwise, at that point in time, when the design is done, we can come back and go to bidding.
So this is to approve entering into design contract with Strand. What is the cost on that? Am I missing it?
So $79,000 for engineering and design. They're
Okay.
you probably have to add another $20,000 some for geotechnical engineering. We're gonna need railroad permitting. We're gonna also need some permits with DNR.
So right now, though, are we only approving that 79,000 for engineering design?
No, so we could get a complete design. We'd like an award for $100,000.
So maybe a not to exceed 100,000, or how do we want to do that?
Not to exceed would be fine, I think. Yeah.
You have any questions for Roger? Otherwise, we'll entertain a motion.
I move to award the contract to Strand for not to exceed $100,000.
We have a motion by Alderman Gasper. Do we have a second? Second by Cam. Any further discussion? Hearing none?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Alderman Sigwart.
Roger and I talked about this briefly, but they list 11 items that they're not going to do,
Okay.
which are actually more than what they're going to do. Okay, I'm kidding. But I just would like Roger to rapidly go through those and say who's going to do that.
Yeah. Actually, it must be getting past my bedtime. I was totally prepared to do this, and I forgot. All right, so there's service elements not included. Construction staking, so that'll, so this proposal, this is taking us up to final design. So we're not getting into the construction phase. So construction staking, construction administration, that'll come out of the pot. So the permit fees for Union Pacific, that'll be paid for by the city, and actually that is part of the allowances that we just approved. Storm sewer and water main design, we're not anticipating having any issues with those items that we would need to include them. Same with roadway design, we're anticipating only a trench patch, not any kind of complete reconstruct.
Okay.
We're not planning on purchasing any real estate. There was a question prior to the meeting from one of the members here about maybe we want to relocate part of the route because going through the We Energies property that might in the future be developable. So I'm not anticipating buying any property here, but the final route will get determined during design, but that's actually a good concern to be looking at, that make sure we don't put us, part of this project is to move a sewer from underneath an existing building, and we don't want to put it in a future location where a building might go. Meetings with property owners, the city will do that. We'll make sure that however good of a job we do, we seem to care a lot more than our consultants about those sort of things, and try to make our current property owners happy. So we'll meet with the property owners. We don't believe there's any wetlands out here to delineate. And since this is connecting highway, we should not have to involve DOT with any permitting.
Do those two sentences make sense to you, Roger? I'm just going to read them out loud because I think that's number 10. It is not anticipated that WSDOT permitting will be required since Spring Street, or State Trunk Highway 32, is a connecting highway. If a detour that will impact traffic closer to County Trunk Highway LL going south is required, then state review will be necessary. I don't understand that sentence.
Yeah, I think if they're thinking if they put a road in there that would somehow we'd have to divert traffic off of Spring Street.
To LL.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then we need it, but our thought is that we should be able to maintain traffic flow through there with some control. And just for anybody else that's.
I was going to say, I think what they're getting at is that if we need a detour route, as a connecting highway, it's only to a little bit past or right around Portview Drive. That's a connecting highway. Beyond that, it is a full state highway. And if we keep the detour within the connecting highway area, then we do not need to get state permits for it. If we are detouring the state highway outside of the connecting highway, then we need state permits. That's the reason we can, like every time there's a parade, we can detour 32 through downtown without needing a permit from the DOT, because that's all on a connecting highway.
And just for the board members that don't know, maybe you all do know, but connecting highway essentially means it's under city control. And then also, again, with the environmental engineering, hopefully we're avoiding any place with gas. And we don't, yeah. So.
All right. Good question, Alderman Sigwart. Any other comments? No? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, I'll take a call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Just one quick comment I'll throw in. This is going to be a much longer design process than most contracts because we're going underneath the railroad, and the permitting for that does take, can take years.
No, this is where I say it'll get done once the Union Pacific abandons the line and the state takes it over.
I have heard that before. Okay. That's a really nice building you had a picture of too there, Roger. I don't know. The transit building. Yeah, it's very nice. All right. Moving on then to item E, consideration and possible action on payment to We Energies for relocation of transformers and upgrading of power at the water filtration plant.
I could probably mostly blame this project on Dan Fisher, but with all the upgrades to the water plant, the first things that need to be done is moving the electric lines, the transformers, all on the south side of the plant, and the service connections to the plant on the south side. All that stuff needs to get moved. And so We Energies has broken it down into 5 projects, which you see here, and that's their cost, and they won't start till we pay them. So we're asking for permission to pay them.
And where will the funds come out of? Is it budgeted in?
It'll come out of essentially right now. It'll come out of water reserve funds, but it'll be part of the $18.3 million capital project that will reimburse that once that loan comes in.
Okay. Seems pretty straightforward on this, right? Nothing we can really do about it, right? I mean,
We need power to.
yeah, okay,
So we need to raise our $300 street opening fees to make up.
okay. And the total price then again is, what's that total cost again, Roger? For the,
$71,916.68.
we have a motion to approve the cost to move the power lines from We Energies for $71,916.68? So moved. Motion by Jim. Do we have a second? Second by Alderman Tierney. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you, Roger. Moving on then to item 6, project updates.
Okay, I'll quickly go through them, but Dan is going to highlight a portion of his. So just real quickly, we have some new signage up down at Heart of the Harbor that we put up that won a Main Street Award. And so I'm happy to say that really we're all a big part of that. Couldn't have been done without any of the players, and everything from Main Street contributing a great deal of the fundraising efforts and participation and providing the design, really. And our street couldn't have been one without our street department, who took that design and was very innovative in its construction, and spent a lot of our staff time putting it together. So it absolutely positively deserved the award for the best public-private partnership in downtown revitalization ever. So I threw in the ever. We could maybe put that up.
I agree.
Anyhow, it was Hall of Fame type of project. So it really was a pleasure to work with Main Street, and I think they feel the same way about working with the city. So
It was seamless, you know. so.
yeah, it really, what a great project. I never worked with a better group of volunteers. On the north side of Upper Lake Park, we've now striped the parking lot so that hopefully that'll encourage people to park off-street rather than on the street, which has been a problem for some of the bigger events up there. We're getting into summer, and so Gerard and Casey are busy improving sewer structures around town. Over the winter, they remodeled the mechanic shop and I think the wood shop too. Brush is, to JD's chagrin, is back in business, brush pickup. So we're out there, took 2 crews the full week to pick up the brush that people waited all winter to put out on the curb. So we're out now every other week until June, right? First week of June, when we get our summer help, and then the summer helpers staff the chipper, and they go out every single week, which is, I know, greatly appreciated by our residents, and so we'll be out every week, essentially June, July, and August, and then it goes back to every other week until, I believe, the first or second week of October. All the, yes. Yep, so, And so, appreciate that, JD. And in our water utility, we had a difficult water main break on Grand Avenue a couple of weeks ago, and I'll just skip to the end of the story. It works now, so. But it was a great amount of effort put into repairing it, and so in the end, it worked out great. Super happy to report that our advanced metering infrastructure is in place. So the antenna that you approved last year is now up on the Mineral Springs Water Tower, and so we're just a few years away from having a complete automatic continuous read system out there. I understand it's working exactly as planned, which is a good thing. And then moving on, I'm going to ask Dan to step up and just talk a little bit about the consumer confidence report. We have minimum reporting requirements every year that's covered in the CCR. But I think Dan put a little extra effort into it this year, and it is up on our website. I'll just say, take it away.
Yeah, I'm just going to give a couple of highlights of the Consumer Confidence Report. It's also called the Annual Water Quality Report. This is mandated by the EPA. It's also ran through the DNR as well. So basically, every drinking water facility has to come up with this report. Much of the information inside the report is actually directly from the EPA, so a lot of the wordage is we don't get to change. However, we can change what this looks like. So a lot of our sampling and reporting is automatically done to the DNR, which then the DNR reports to the EPA. So it kind of work hand in hand. So what the DNR does is they'll generate off of certain information a basic CCR. We would have to go in and change certain information, to per our utility, per our city. You can technically, give that to your customer base, and you'll be fine. You'll meet requirements. However, it is beneficial for us to kind of highlight who we are and what we're selling. And that's kind of what I wanted to do this year, is kind of make our CCR report a little bit more, beautiful. So my main point I just want to say is the second paragraph. For Washington's Public Works, water utility produces some of the highest quality drinking water in the nation. Last year and in years past, your tap water met and exceeded every federal and state drinking water health standards. So that's something obviously that we take very seriously and very prideful for. So throughout this report, we have to give our system information. So basically all the how many miles of main we have, how many fire hydrants we have. We talk about how the public can be engaged by coming to meetings like this tonight. There's general health information, and then it gets more into our source, which we're unique, pulling from the lake, so it kind of explains that, and then also explains what kind of contaminants could possibly come from the lake, and what we treat the lake water with. And then the main, the main part of this is showing what possible contaminants were detected during testing. Every municipality detects contaminants. It doesn't mean that they are harmful or that we are exceeding any kind of limit. So there's different types of chemicals and byproducts that are sampled throughout the year. This year, unlike last year, we'll be sampling a lot more heavy on unregulated contaminants. So that's basically the DNR searching for problems. And we're also sampling for PFAS. Last year, we took a voluntarily sample in the second quarter.
Those are the forever chemicals, right?
Right.
Okay.
And this year, EPA is mandating that every municipality test quarterly. So actually, we have now 2 quarters worth of samples, along with 2022's results. I'll probably come to you guys in a little bit with a little bit more information on that. Just peak, we're sitting in a good spot. So we have to show what contaminants were detected, but like I said earlier, nothing went outside of the range causing any concern. And then at the very end, I just wanted to highlight what the utility accomplished last year, and then kind of what we're looking for this year in 2023. Oops. Obviously, with the water treatment plant improvement project, it's vital to get all this information out to the public and kind of let them know, the process of what's going on and if anything will affect how the water is going to be. So, any questions?
Any questions for Dan at all? Thanks, Dan. Looks real good. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Alderman Sigwart.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the new water bills. They're excellent.
Yes, they should.
I was actually able to explain them to my neighbors who thought that they got billed twice in a row
Right.
too soon because you sent the bills out on May 5th and they're not due until the 28th of May.
Right. So now we're reading and then we're sending the bills out and having them due at a much, more normal pace. I'm glad you brought that up. I also want to say that this report is listed on the bill. We have to somehow get it to all the customers, and one of the options is putting it on water bill, both printed and the electronic ones.
Good deal. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, so with the new billings, our new treasurer, Mark Emanuelson, has now put the water utility in a position where they're collecting for water bills, with only a 1 month lag time. There used to be a 2 month lag time. So it's in part because of the new way that we are reading meters and getting information to our treasurer. So
Jason, can I add a comment here?
Yeah, Roger, go ahead.
On the CCR and what Dan put together, if anybody just thinks that this is routine, piece of cake, everybody does it, I would just suggest that you Google Jackson, Mississippi, and go on YouTube and see what kind of situation they have had, which also kind of goes to that. We certainly appreciate the support to do the water upgrade plant because we don't want to be Jackson, Mississippi.
I assume they're having problems. Yeah. Okay. I've been there. It's hot. I drink a lot of water there. All right. Thank you, Roger. And what else do we got, Rob?
real quickly in forestry, they're planting 200 trees this spring. None of them are street trees. They're going to wait for street tree planting until the fall. They burn the prairie at Birchwood Hills at the end of April, and they're getting into mowing season. We're doing a little bit to promote No Mow May this year, so that encourages residents to let their lawns grow a little wild in May, because that helps pollinators who rely on dandelions and
I really love the idea anyways, just
yeah.
avoid.
Well, hey, yeah, it's great.
My neighbors can't get upset with me,
Sure. Gives me more time on Saturday to relax, right? Anyhow, so, but no, we're doing a little more. It's something I'm seeing they're doing it, I know, in Cedarburg, and I heard about it in Door County, and I know a number of communities are promoting No Mow May.
Looking for a no shoveling month in the
Yeah,
in the winter.
no shoveling January. It's got to help something. I don't know. And so here we are taking we have to take I know the lights are appreciated by everyone downtown, but if we leave them on, they will eventually burn out and look bad. But beyond that, they're not good for the trees to leave on. So we do need to replace them every year. And so we essentially take the summer off. They do spend quite a bit of time putting them on in November. And so once a year is pretty much all our staff can handle. Here's the prairie burn at Birchwood Hills. I don't think it was super easy because it was fairly wet when they were doing it. There's no mow May. They've also been working over at the pool, patching up some leaks that they had. JD knows more than I do. What, the leaks at the pool?
There was some, water line. Basically, the pool didn't get underground correctly and cracked. So we went down there, whole parts of the pieces. They had a guy come and do detector and found where they were. So we started busting the concrete and unfortunately found the crack that they were very much to go down. So we just had to keep working on more concrete until the crack ended. So they cut pipes out, installed new pipes. They did all of that last winter. Last winter. And then Monday, last week, Thursday, we put concrete down. But did leave down like half inch because like opposite of the top is what we did today. So leaks fixed, closures torn.
Be warm enough to swim in the next couple of months. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Can you go back to your photograph of the library?
Oh, yeah, sure.
You know, just beyond the lovely Unicorn Library sign, there's at least two horses that have been there since some of the stuff has been falling down. Couldn't somebody patch that back up to at least make it look a little bit better? It's just kind of disgusting looking that the bricks are down on the ground. You know, maybe it doesn't fit into the long-term plans for the library, but short-term, couldn't we do something about that?
Well, so the retaining wall, you're talking about the retaining wall that's holding up the planted beds is essentially failed. It's not, it should have never been constructed that way, but it was. And to fix it would either cost a private contractor $80,000 or we find time with our own staff, which we're very limited on, to do it ourselves. And so we essentially have it blocked off because it's a danger. It could topple over at any given time. And so it's something we're trying to work in, but it was neither a budgeted item nor in terms of staff time or dollars. So it's a bigger project than probably it would appear to the casual observer. I guess I'll just put it that way. We don't like it either, but it's a big project.
Isn't there more of a Band-Aid approach to it rather than a full-fledged?
I'm on the library board, and we actually discussed this last issue, and they're reluctant to do a Band-Aid approach because it may cause more problems than actually waiting until we can do it right. And
Yeah, the entire wall is tilting from the base up to the top, so it needs to be removed. A new base needs to be installed, and the whole wall is failing. It's not just one section. It's the whole thing. So,
Should have never planted those plants.
well, I don't know that it's the plans. And I'll spare everyone the details, but it shouldn't have been constructed the way it was 20 years ago. So we'll say, make sure I get the timing right, 23 years ago. So, but yeah, we don't like it either. It's just, the harbor master, reports that, the boats are coming in slowly because of the poor weather, but, interesting to note that they had, 75,000 Chinook, or 87,000 Chinook salmon. And then another 87,000 plus 75,000. So, what if?
At least half the fish, like, just during the day, and the other half we raise that. I've done this for 3 years. It's a pretty interesting project.
Yeah.
It basically needs to be done when there's a lot of natural stuff to the lake, but these fish basically imprint on our harbor, come back as 4-year-old king salmon, which everybody's targeting, to our port. So a lot of ports do this same approach to basically prevent them. Just kind of interesting.
And so you have to do it very carefully because the seagulls are waiting when they do this. So, yeah. And then finally, Dan's report here. No offense, but there you go. And, and as well as engineering. I'll just highlight that the street improvement project is moving along on schedule. I think the only issue we're concerned about is how long We Energies is going to take to relay some gas mains on the project. But if that goes according to their plans, we should have the project, completed on time in July. Oh, and the fuel tanks they started putting in the fuel tanks at the marina on yesterday. And then real quickly, I think this will be the last thing we have to talk about, but we had a public information meeting for the water filtration plant last night. It was fairly well attended by interested parties over at Newport Shores and at the high rise. And so this is one of the renderings, gives you the west, south, and east elevations. We can't put windows on this building because this is essentially the holding tanks for the clear water. So we're proposing some murals. Those have been well received. The new paint color has been well received. We're matching the exterior of the building. The brickwork, framing the murals will be the same type of brick that's on the front of the building where the fountain is. We have our designer SEH looking at exploring the possibility of lowering that two-story section where the generator will be, and so stay tuned to see if we're able to lower the entire project down to just one story, or possibly even move the location of the generator somewhere else. So that's this part right here. And then today, same thing at design review. We presented this rendering, and with the exception of just a few comments regarding landscaping and supporting the effort to try and remove that two-story section that was approved by design review. And we anticipate putting this project out for bid in what month, Roger? Okay, looking at July right now for bidding. I think that is it. All of the 169-page board report that I'm sure you read in the 3 days that you had to look at.
I'm glad you got it to us in enough time.
Yeah.
By the way, John Crane's, his little airplane guy that takes pictures,
Yeah.
really does a nice job, okay? How many bidders would you expect will get on a project this size? I mean, I got to think they're going to, certainly Madison, maybe Minneapolis,
I'm
maybe
gonna guess
Chicago.
5. Go ahead, Roger.
I had that discussion with our engineer, so Rob's right, probably number-wise is 5. They really expect the Wisconsin companies to bid. Maybe you get somebody out of Northern Illinois, but their experience, he said, just a recent project that they had in the Twin Cities, that, it drew about this size, only just drew local bidders. So,
There's plenty of work out there.
right. So, yeah, he said you essentially got to get up to about 30 million, and then you get a little bit more regional bidding. So, I'm expecting 4 or 5 big ones will bid it.
That's a good turnout, though, 4 or 5. Yeah, okay. All right, anything else? Nope. Great job, everybody. There's a lot going on in Port Washington that we all don't know about every day, so thank you. Any forthcoming events? Nope. Public Works?
Really?
All right. You guys live and breathe it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Alderman Tierney. We have a second? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody.